We've got breaking news out of college football where Ole Miss's Lane Kiffin has announced he is leaving Oxford to become the next head coach of the LSU Tigers. The news comes 2 days after he led the Rebels to their first 11-win regular season in program history and are all but assured a spot in the college football playoff. Kiffin, despite requesting to do so, will not be coaching Ole Miss in the CFP. Our Matt Zenitz and Brandon Marcello report that defensive coordinator Pete Golding will be named the next head coach of the Rebels. He'll take the reins starting with the college football playoff. Kiffin will take over an LSU program that fired Brian Kelly back in October in the middle of his fourth season in Baton Rouge. The Tigers have not made the CFP since winning a national title back in 2019. Let's bring on Brandon Marcello. And Brandon, this seems to have dragged on a little bit longer than what we were anticipating. So how did we get here?
Yeah, a lot of red tape. I think Lane Kiffin's been dragging Ole Miss through red tape. There's been a lot of discussions in the background about, I want to coach in the college football playoff. Will Ole Miss allow me? Because he's going to a rival program in the SEC. He's going to be recruiting against them. He's going to be coaching against them. So how do you allow that to happen? You really just can't. And that was the argument that was being had between Kiffin and also Ole Miss. Also the question of, which staff members are you going to be able to leave here for us to push through a college football playoff here? There are discussions there about that, especially with his offensive staff. Lane Kiffin, obviously an offensive-minded coach and someone who wants to bring some of his close buddies with him down to Baton Rouge so they can hit the ground running there and start recruiting and also figuring out what they're going to do in the transfer portal. So a lot of red tape, a lot of discussions being had there, including the chancellor of the university there on on Saturday, and then also continuing into Sunday morning. We've had delay after delay after delay, but we have finally reached a resolution. Lane Kiffin is headed to LSU.
And this got a lot more contentious than we believed that the breakup could potentially be. I know the calendar has a lot to do with this, but ultimately, what does this do for Lane Kiffin's legacy at Ole Miss, a place that he brought to historic heights?
Yeah, he went from a coach who could very well have had a statue built of him in Oxford to a guy who's going to be the absolute villain there until he leaves LSU and maybe even years beyond that. He's completely ruined his legacy. They'll appreciate what he did for them, but they'll always see him as the guy of what could have been. Why would you leave such a situation where you won 10 games, 3 straight seasons? You had a chance to win, not just contend, win a national championship. You're in the playoffs, buddy. And you decided, nah, I'm going to go start fresh. And this is a continued trend for Lane Kiffin. I know the big thing and the storyline for him the last 2 years is how he's turned his life around, and that's great. But he's the same coach in the way he handles things as far as when he leaves programs. He left Tennessee in the middle of the night after a year to go to USC and held a weird impromptu press conference, if you remember that. I'm sure you do, Emily.
I do.
But then he went to USC and got fired pretty much right after a game. In that situation, when he was at Alabama and got his second chance in college football with Nick Saban to rehabilitate his image, he took the head coaching job at FAU, which is fine, but his concentration was so lacking. Nick Saban told him, you have to leave now. You cannot help us coach to the playoffs. This isn't working. So he left for FAU. Then he goes to Ole Miss, does this situation. And let's not forget, 3 years ago, he was flirting with Auburn for 3 straight weeks, and it hurt Ole Miss in the record book. They started losing games, and their season went south. He ended up staying at Ole Miss. The common trend, you can't change his colors, and he's the same exact guy he's always been when it comes to moving upward or downward or sideways in his coaching career.
And unfortunately, amid this saga, where does it leave the players, I think, is the question that we're asking here. In the statement that Lane Kiffin released, he said he asked Keith Carter if he could continue to coach them. Also said the team asked if he could continue to coach. So what is the sentiment among players now that they turn to Pete Golding as their new coach?
I'm sure they're going to embrace him. What will be fascinating to watch is if there might even be any players who try to opt out before the playoffs. I think, obviously, that's going to be a discussion point, but I don't see how that can happen. These players have worked so hard through the season, and whether Lane Kiffin's your head coach or not, it doesn't matter if I'm the head coach or anybody off the street's head coach. You work so hard for this. Go earn yourself a national championship. Go play for it. I just don't see those kids doing that and opting out. I think they'll wait till January. They're going to finish this season. It's a whole other discussion about whether the head coach should finish the season. If Lane Kiffin was going to the NFL, or if Lane Kiffin was even, say, going to a Penn State or something like that, outside the conference, outside the confines of your recruiting footprint, maybe there's a discussion to be had. But you're talking about a school that is right down the road in Baton Rouge, where you play them every year for a trophy in the Magnolia Bowl. You can't do that. And for Lane Kiffin to try to convince himself otherwise is just silly and speak right now. And certainly maybe an argument that could be had among their lawyers and everything if they ever want to go down that route.
Yeah, certainly no reason for players to leave at this point with the transfer portal opening, but it does open before the college football playoff semifinals and championship, so we may revisit this conversation down the line. Brandon, you look at just how contentious that this got down the stretch, but ultimately now they do turn their attention to Pete Golding, who is not just expected to be the interim head coach, but the permanent head coach for Ole Miss. What should the playoff committee do with Ole Miss as they enter the postseason now with a new head coach?
This is the smartest move for Ole Miss to make, because the argument was going to be, how much do you dock an Ole Miss team that just lost head coach? You even saw Vegas putting out lines of what the line would look like with Lane Kiffin against a certain team, and a line if Lane Kiffin wasn't the head coach. Now you have a guy that's not just your interim coach, but is going to be there for the long haul. So whatever philosophy, whatever ways he does about preparing for the playoff and his game preparations is exactly what this program is going to be in the future. They're not going to be in turmoil behind the scenes. You're not going to have players wondering who is going to be my next head coach. That's not the case now. They can all focus on what's ahead. They have their head coach for now and in the future. I think that'll send a clear message to the College Football Playoff Committee. And if they do dock them a spot or two, I don't think it'll be enough, obviously, to knock them out of the playoff, like as some may be saying out there. That's just not the case. And in my eyes, Ole Miss, the players on the field, are the ones who win the games. Coaches lose games. Players win games. These players won 11 games. They've only lost one. They deserve to host a playoff game there in Oxford, Mississippi.
Yeah, despite all of this, it has been a fantastic story. Ole Miss winning 11 games in the regular season for the first time in school history, and all but assured a spot in the CFP. Brandon Marcello, appreciate you breaking down that breaking news. This is the official tweet from Lane Kiffin, saying after a lot of prayer and time spent with family, he's made the difficult decision to accept the head coaching position at LSU.